Jane Mirren slammed a $100,000 check onto the breakroom counter and pointed it at the black janitor she'd just humiliated. "Cook for my husband," she sneered, seconds before every phone in the room started recording. No one knew that one bite of Regina's food would make the billionaire CEO break down in front of the entire company. But what happened after that left Jane shaking and in tears. Jane Mirren's heels struck the tile like gunshots as she marched into the Mirren Tech breakroom, her designer red dress slicing through the air like a warning. Employees froze. Phones stopped mid-scroll. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt like it held its breath. "You've got to be kidding me," Jane snapped, her eyes locking onto Regina King, the 27-year-old janitor quietly reheating her lunch. "That smell is what's been drifting through my building all week." Regina didn't flinch. She simply stirred her oxtail stew, the scent of slow-cooked spices warming the room. Jane stepped closer, face twisted with disbelief. "My husband refuses every Michelin star meal I put in front of him. But he eats this." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "What is it exactly?" "Leftovers from the dollar store." A few employees gasped. One whispered, "Oh no, she's going too far." Jane reached into her bag with theatrical fury and pulled out a check. Not just any check, a check written for $100,000. She waved it inches from Regina's face, exactly like someone presenting evidence in court. "Fine," Jane hissed. "If Jackson prefers your, whatever this is, over the gourmet meals I pay thousands for, this money is yours." She slammed the check onto the counter. "But if he doesn't? You keep your head down. You stop bringing this smell into my building. And you remember your place." Regina set her spoon down slowly, just as calm as Marcus setting down his chalk in the competitor's story. Her eyes lifted. Steady, quiet, unshakable. "I'll cook for him." A wave of murmurs rippled through the break room. Two employees grabbed their phones. A security guard whispered behind his hand, "This is going to get someone fired." Jane smirked, certain she had engineered Regina's humiliation, certain this moment would crush her. But what happened in the next few minutes? The tasting, the tears, the childhood memories ripped open, wouldn't just shake the Mirren family. It would explode across the internet, expose buried secrets, and turn the invisible janitor into the most talked-about woman in the country. Now, let's go back to how Regina ended up in that kitchen on that day. Unseen, underestimated, and holding the one thing that would change everything, her grandmother's recipe. This is where our incredible story begins. But to understand how, before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me where in the world you are from. I hope this story makes you believe in respect and appreciate kindness. Regina King didn't grow up dreaming of working in the skyscraper where the world's richest argued about numbers she'd never earn. She grew up dreaming of warmth, a kitchen filled with the smell of oxtail simmering for hours, her grandmother humming gospel as she stirred the pot, and the soft clatter of enamel plates on an old wooden table. But now she stood in the Mirren Tech executive kitchen, sleek white counters, chrome accents, everything too shiny to touch, with executives secretly filming from behind coffee machines, waiting to see her humiliated. Jane Mirren paced in her designer heels as though she owned not just the room, but gravity itself. "All right," Jane said, voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "Let's bring him in." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "This is bad. This is really bad." Regina kept her eyes on her food. Her grandmother always said, "Flavors listen to your spirit. If your spirit's shaking, your food will too." So Regina breathed slow. Steady. Calm. The door to the executive hallway clicked open, and Jackson Mirren walked in. The billionaire CEO didn't look like his TV interviews or magazine covers. There was no polished smile, no confident posture, no hint of the swagger people expected from a man worth $80 billion. Jackson looked tired. No, drained. Dark circles under his eyes. A loosened tie. Shoulders pulled down by invisible weights. A few workers straightened as if expecting him to bark orders. He didn't. He barely even looked up. He simply asked, in a voice low and rough, "Jane, what is this about?" Jane immediately wrapped herself around his arm as if staking a claim. "Honey, there's a little situation." She forced a brittle laugh. "You've been refusing to eat the meals I have chefs prepare. So I found out why." Jackson blinked, confused. "What are you talking of?" Jane pointed dramatically at Regina like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. She wants you to try her stew. Several employees winced. Others began recording more discreetly. Regina's heart thudded, but she kept her posture straight. Jackson looked at the container in Regina's hands, then at her face. For one brief moment, something, curiosity, recognition, flickered in his eyes. But Jane pulled him closer before he could speak. She thinks her low-class dish is better than the meals I hire professionals to make, Jane said loudly. For the cameras, she pretended not to notice. So I made her an offer. If you prefer her food, she gets that check. She lifted the $100,000 check high in the air. Phones zoomed in. Workers gasped again, not at the money, but at her arrogance. Jackson rubbed his temples. Jane, this isn't an EC. Oh, it absolutely is, she snapped. Then, softening only for appearances, just have a taste. One bite. Then we can put this nonsense behind us. Nonsense. Regina swallowed. Hard. Jackson looked at her again. This time, he seemed to really see her. A tired janitor, holding lunch she'd scrimped to make, surrounded by people waiting for her to fall. And gently, he stepped forward. What's your name, he asked. Regina King, sir. May I? She nodded and held out the container. The room fell silent. A pin drop would have echoed. Jackson lifted the fork. His hand shook, not from anger, but from exhaustion only the overworked understand. He took one bite, and the world inside Jackson Mirren, the polished, billionaire world, shattered. His eyes widened first, not in surprise, but in recognition. Then his shoulders trembled. A sound escaped him, not a gasp, not a choke, but a soft, wounded exhale. His knees almost buckled. Jackson. Jane laughed nervously. Honey? It's just stew. But Jackson wasn't in the executive kitchen anymore. He was 8 years old again, standing barefoot in a tiny, dimly lit kitchen. A pot simmered on the stove, oxtail, onions, thyme, black pepper, a splash of soy sauce. His mother's voice floated through the steam, humming old hymns as she stirred. He felt the warmth on his cheeks, felt her hand ruffle his hair. He heard her whisper, Eat, baby. I know you're hungry. I'm trying. He hadn't heard that voice in decades. He hadn't tasted that flavor since she died. Jackson's mouth quivered. His breath fractured. Tears welled, slow at first, then fast, blurring the room, streaking down his face in silent rivers. The first tear hit the countertop with an audible drop. Someone in the back gasped, Oh my God, he's crying. Another whispered, Is he okay? Phones kept recording. Jane's confident smile collapsed into panic. Jackson, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. It's just food. He didn't hear her. He took another bite. And another. And another. Each bite pulled him deeper into the ache of his past. The childhood poverty, the nights when dinner was a luxury. The mornings he woke to the smell of stew because his mother saved the last portion for him and lied about eating already. He remembered the last bowl she ever made. How she placed it in front of him, though her hands trembled from sickness. How she smiled, even though she'd been crying moments earlier. And how he never tasted it again. Until now. His fork clattered onto the counter as his composure crumbled. He covered his mouth with his hand to muffle a sob. A raw, broken sound that sliced through the room. Jane stepped back in shock. Jackson? Honey. He raised a shaking finger, wordlessly telling her to stop speaking. Everyone in the room stared. Regina stood frozen, unsure whether to look at him or away. Her grandmother always said, When someone cries over your food, let them. It's the soul remembering something it lost. Jackson steadied himself, wiping at his face, uselessly, because more tears came. He turned to Regina, where his voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Where did you learn to cook this? Regina's eyes softened. My grandmother taught me, sir. Your grandmother? Yes. She raised me. He swallowed, staring at the stew like it was a message from another world. Jane forced a laugh. A desperate, trembling sound. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your little nostalgia trip, darling, she said loudly for the cameras. Now let's be reasonable. You're not actually saying. But Jackson wasn't listening to her. He stepped closer to Regina, an odd reverence in his eyes. What did you put in this? He asked quietly. The seasoning, the broth, it's exactly, his voice broke again. Exactly like hers. Workers exchanged stunned glances. Cameras zoomed closer. Regina spoke gently, respecting the pain she saw in him. It's a family recipe. My grandmother cooked it the same way her mother taught her. Jackson's breath hitched. He braced himself against the counter. Jane's face twisted, confusion, then denial, then something colder. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. It's food. It's stew. There's nothing special about it. Jackson flinched as if she'd slapped him. Regina's hands tightened around the container, but her expression stayed calm, steady, the way her grandmother taught her to be when people looked down on her. Someone in the back whispered, "Why is she talking like that? He's clearly going through something." Jane stomped closer. "This is ridiculous. You cannot be crying over a janitor's lunch." Phones picked up every word. And Jackson snapped. "Jane." His voice was low. "Dangerous." The room froze. He turned, eyes blazing with a depth of hurt she had never bothered to see. "You don't get to decide what this means to me." Jane went silent, instantly. Jackson inhaled shakily, trying to find words as his memories churned inside him. "When I was a kid," he said slowly, eyes distant, "my mother used to cook this exact dish. We were poor. We barely had food. But she made this stew when she could afford it, and every time she did, his voice trembled again. It meant we were going to be okay, even if just for that night." The room softened. Even the workers filming lowered their phones for a moment, touched by the raw honesty. Jackson turned back to Regina, blinking through tears. "How did you make it taste exactly like hers?" he whispered. Regina spoke gently. "I cook with love, sir. That's how she taught me." Those words hit him like thunder. Love. A foreign language in his house. A memory he hadn't heard in years. Jane scoffed bitterly. "Oh, please. Enough with the sentimental act. She probably threw spices together and got lucky. You're overreacting." Jackson finally faced her fully. "Jane, stop talking." Dead silence. No one had ever heard him speak to her like that. Jackson wiped his eyes, still trembling from the emotional avalanche. He looked at the fork, then at Regina, then at the stunned witnesses. Then he said it. The words that would explode across the internet. The words that would rewrite everything. "This," he paused, breath shaking. "This tastes like home." And the entire room gasped. Phones flew up. Regina's breath caught. Jane's world cracked. And the rest of the story, the viral storm, the truth, the consequences, began in that exact second, with one man remembering the mother he'd lost, and one woman's cooking bringing him back to her. The second Jackson Mirren whispered, "This tastes like home," the world inside the executive kitchen erupted. Phones shot higher. Cameras zoomed in. Gasps turned into frantic whispers. And then, upload buttons were pressed. Dozens of employees, interns, assistants, even a visiting vendor, everyone who had quietly recorded the scene, hit post with trembling fingers. To TikTok, to Twitter, to Instagram Reels, to private group chats that would not stay private for long. Within seconds, Regina King's face, Jackson's tears, and Jane's open-mouthed shock were online. By the time Regina even realized people were uploading, the first video had already hit 30,000 views. By the time Jane regained her voice, it hit 200,000. And by the time Jackson wiped the last tear from his face, it hit 1.2 million. Hashtag CookLikeRegina takes over the internet. The first viral clip wasn't even from an employee. It was from a teenage intern named Alyssa, who captioned her video. "The billionaire CEO just cried over the janitor's food, loudly crying face, pot of food, hashtag CookLikeRegina." That hashtag, created as a joke, became the match that lit an inferno. By noon, hashtag CookLikeRegina was number 3 trending in the country. By 2 p.m., it was number 1 worldwide. People stitched the videos, reacted to them, analyzed every second. One clip focused on the moment Jane said low-class meals. Another zoomed in on Jackson's trembling hands as he tasted the stew. Another replayed Jane shouting, "It's just stew," dozens of times. The internet had questions. Why would she talk to a janitor like that? How did her food break a billionaire? Wait, why does his wife sound jealous? Who is Regina King, and where can I buy her cookbook? Then came the edits, slow-motion clips of Jackson crying set to emotional music. Memes of Jane scowling while Regina calmly held her food. Timelines breaking down the Mirantech stew scandal. It was chaos. Beautiful, uncontrollable internet chaos. The more the videos spread, the more people zoomed in on Jane's tone. Her sneer. Her pointed laugh. Her emphasis on janitor. Her condescending, low-class meals. And people did not hold back. Comments exploded. Rich lady acting like seasoning is a personal attack. Imagine being threatened by someone's simmering meat. She screams racism mixed with entitlement. I'd eat Regina's stew before touching whatever vibes that woman brings. Hashtags bloomed. Hashtag janitors deserve respect. Hashtag Jane Mirren canceled. Hashtag eat the rich. Hashtag Oxdale revolution. Then came duets from black creators. Every black grandma just sat up in their grave like, who said low class. Critics began calling it a case study in classism. Others pointed out Jane's clear racial bias. Jane Mirren went from billionaire fashion icon to public enemy #1 overnight. And she hadn't even checked her phone yet. By 3 p.m., news trucks began circling the building like vultures. CNN, BBC, Daily Mail, BuzzFeed, even Food Network reporters showed up. Questions flew at security. Is it true the CEO cried? Is the wife refusing to pay? Can we interview Regina King? Is the stew available for tasting? Does Mirantech discriminate against service workers? Security guards blocked the doors as people tried to push in. Inside, executives panicked. Mirantech's PR director nearly fainted when she saw the trending numbers. The VP of Communications kept whispering, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Nobody could find Jane. Jackson locked himself in his office. And Regina ran. Her lungs burned as she fled down the hallway, past conference rooms and panicked executives. She didn't stop until she reached the one place she always felt invisible, the janitor supply closet. She slipped inside, closed the door, and pressed her forehead against the cool metal shelf. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Hundreds of notifications. Unknown numbers. Strangers tagging her. She didn't dare look. Her hands shook as she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" She'd cooked a meal. Nothing more. Nothing less. But somehow the world had turned it into a revolution. Her breathing quickened. Tears pricked her eyes. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't ask for cameras. She didn't ask to become the face of anything. She just wanted to eat her lunch. Footsteps approached. Voices whispered outside. "She's in there. I think the janitor's hiding. Should we get her?" "Dude, she's literally famous right now." Regina covered her ears, trying to drown them out. She wasn't famous. She was terrified. By the time Jane reappeared, she had regained enough composure to pretend she was in control. But her eyes were wild, her jaw trembling, her fists clenched around that $100,000 check. She marched into the cafeteria, reporters shouting from outside the glass doors. A small group of employees watched her warily. One of them, a bold young accountant, asked timidly, "Mrs. Mirren, are you going to pay her?" Jane spun around so fast the woman flinched. "Pay her?" Jane spat. "Pay her? Are you people insane?" It wasn't a real bet. Phones immediately rose. Recordings began. "I would never give $100,000 to a janitor." Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, "Oh, she's done." Jane kept ranting, unaware the internet was hearing every word. "That girl got lucky," Jane snapped. "Lucky? She manipulated my husband, and now I'm expected to reward her for it. Absolutely not." She stormed past them, only to find a phone inches from her face. The young accountant spoke calmly. "You do realize you're being recorded again?" Jane's expression cracked, then crumbled. But the damage was already done. Within minutes, her rant was online. Within an hour, it had 20 million views. Jane Mirren was officially canceled. HR goes into full crisis mode. HR summoned every available employee to emergency meetings. They formed committees, drafted statements, rehearsed responses, tried to reach Jane, tried to reach Jackson, tried to reach Regina. PR wanted a press conference. Legal wanted silence. Board directors wanted resignations. Nobody agreed on anything except one unavoidable fact. This was the worst PR disaster in Mirantech history. One HR manager sighed into her hands. We had trainings on discrimination last year. We literally had her in the room. Another snapped back. No one can train someone who thinks humility is a disease. They argued. They panicked. They emailed furiously. But the machine was too slow. The internet was too fast. Mirren Tech was burning. Jane desperately tries to reclaim the narrative. By evening, Jane's PR agent arrived at the building with a team of stylists, a ring light, and a drafted apology video. Jane, we need to get ahead of this. I did nothing wrong. Jane shouted, pacing in circles. Millions of people disagree, the agent whispered. Jane froze. Her face paled. No, she breathed. No, I'm not racist. I'm not. I was upset. Jackson embarrassed me. She manipulated him. Everyone is exaggerating. The agent put a gentle hand on her shoulder. You need to apologize. Jane shook her head violently. She doesn't deserve my apology. She doesn't deserve anything. Cameras caught that, too. And the internet roasted her alive. Jackson watches the chaos in silence. While the world argued, Jackson remained in his office. Alone. The blinds drawn. His tie removed. The half-eaten stew still sitting on his desk, like a relic. His phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from investors, the board, journalists, his wife. He ignored them all. In front of him, replaying silently on loop, was the video of himself crying. But he didn't look embarrassed. He looked haunted. He paused it on the exact moment he first tasted Regina's stew, the moment his past cracked open. His voice, when he finally whispered, was barely audible. Mom. He rubbed his face, exhausted beyond anything money could fix. Then he replayed the clip again. And again, not because he enjoyed it, but because he couldn't recognize the man he'd become. A man who forgot the things that mattered. A man who let himself be reshaped by wealth, pressure, expectations. A man who let Jane's values become his own. A man who hadn't tasted home in 20 years. And now the entire world knew it. He closed his eyes, whispering into the dark, "What have we done?" Outside his office, reporters screamed for him. Inside, Jackson Mirren sat alone with a bowl of stew and a lifetime of guilt. Regina's phone won't stop ringing. Back in the janitor closet, Regina finally looked at her phone. She wished she hadn't. Hundreds of messages. Texts from people she barely knew. Unknown numbers asking for interviews. DMs from strangers praising her. Others begging for recipes. Some offering money. Some wanting business deals. She scrolled and found one message from her cousin. "Girl, you are on the news, turn on CNN right now." Another from a coworker. "Are you safe? The reporters are asking for you." Another from someone she didn't recognize. "Regina, I'm from the New York Times. Can we schedule a conversation?" Her head spun. She felt sick. She felt trapped. She felt seen. Too seen. And that was the most terrifying part. Throughout the night, the world picketed through screens. Regina King, humble, kind, hardworking, became the symbol of authenticity the world craved. Jackson Mirren became the billionaire who remembered he had a heart. And Jane became the face of arrogant cruelty. By midnight, a pinned tweet summarized the entire situation. A janitor cooked with love. A billionaire remembered his mother. And a cruel wife got exposed. Hashtag CookLikeRegina. The story had escaped Mirren Tech's walls. Now it belonged to the world. And nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the Mirren Tech stew explosion felt like the aftermath of a hurricane. Silent, eerie, and charged with the anticipation of more destruction. No one dared speak above a whisper. Security locked every entrance. Executives huddled in corners. Assistants wiped their screens constantly, terrified something else would go viral. The board of directors issued a 6 a.m. emergency order. Full internal investigation into conduct concerning the CEO's wife. All employees are encouraged to submit reports immediately. Encouraged was a polite corporate word. Everyone knew the truth. The world demanded answers. And heads. And Jane Mirren's name sat at the top of every list. By 9 a.m., the Human Resources Department looked like a war bunker. Report stacks grew into mountains. USB drives were piled like ammunition. Anonymous submissions flooded digital inboxes faster than the staff could read them. The HR director, Linda Vasquez, hadn't slept. Her mascara smudged under her eyes, her hair pulled into a stress bun. Begin categorizing by severity, she ordered her team. Verbal abuse, discrimination, professional interference, harassment, whatever it is, sort it. A young HR assistant whispered, "We're going to need more folders." They created a new category within minutes. Reports poured in. From receptionists. From janitors. From catering staff. From drivers. From mid-level managers afraid to speak until now. One testimony read, "She told me my accent made the company look uneducated. I haven't spoken in front of visitors since." Another, "She demanded I redo an entire event setup because I looked too poor to decorate a billionaire's party." Another, from a Latina cleaner, "She once threw a tray of croissants at me because they weren't golden enough. She said, 'People like you should be grateful to even stand in my kitchen.'" Another, "I had a promotion pending for months. Jane told my boss she didn't want ugly faces near her husband. The promotion disappeared. And the worst, I tried reporting her 2 years ago. HR told me she wasn't an employee and therefore not under their jurisdiction. I didn't bother trying again." Linda pinched the bridge of her nose and muttered, "Damn it, I knew this day would come." But the reports kept coming. By noon, the team had logged 112 verbal abuse reports, 37 promotion interference claims, 19 recorded incidents caught on internal cameras, and 6 claims that required legal escalation. The Mirren empire had officially cracked. Whispers spread through the tower. Employees who normally avoided gossip found themselves whispering in corners. "Did you submit your report?" "Oh, absolutely. She told me once that my skin tone clashed with her event theme. She called my lunch peasant food." "No way. I have it on video." People exchange stories like war veterans comparing scars. And at the center of it all, the most repeated phrase, "I hope Regina sues her." Regina King, however, had no idea any of this was happening. She was hiding again. Regina tries to disappear. She worked early, before most executives arrived, pushing her mop quietly across polished floors. A few employees passed her, offering small smiles or soft hellos. Not mocking, not dismissive, respectful. She didn't know what to do with it. Every few minutes, her phone buzzed. Friends, strangers, reporters. She turned it off. But the world didn't turn off with it. She rounded a corner and nearly stepped backward when she spotted 2 HR managers whispering urgently. When they noticed her, they straightened, nodded politely, and scurried off. It made her uneasy, so she ducked into an empty hallway and slipped into one of the supply rooms, her safe space. She sat on an overturned bucket and exhaled hard. Then she heard footsteps approaching. Not frantic, not hurried. Slow, heavy, deliberate. She froze. Then the door opened. Jackson Mirren comes to find her. Jackson Mirren stepped into the dimly lit supply room, closing the door gently behind him. He looked different in the shadows. Less like a billionaire, more like a man carrying 3 lifetimes of exhaustion. His tie was loose. His sleeves rolled. His eyes still swollen from the night before. Regina shot to her feet. "Sir, I wasn't hiding, I was just—" "You were hiding," Jackson said softly. He didn't smile, but his voice held no ridicule. "And honestly, I don't blame you." Regina's throat tightened. He stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. "I came to apologize," he said simply. She blinked. "Apologize? For what Jane did? For what the company allowed? For the cameras? For everything?" His voice cracked at the end. Regina didn't know what to say. This was the most powerful man in the building. The one whose signature could change an entire industry overnight. And yet he stood before her with his head slightly bowed, as if she was the one holding power. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered. "No," he said, shaking his head. "But I didn't stop it. And that is my fault." Silence lingered before Jackson cleared his throat. "Yesterday, your food." He paused, eyes softening. "It brought back someone I lost. Someone I haven't let myself remember in a long time." Regina swallowed. She recognized grief when she saw it. He continued, "My mother. She used to cook oxtail stew. It smelled," he breathed in slowly. "Exactly like yours." Regina nodded gently. My grandma's recipe, she said. Jackson's eyes brightened. Would you tell me about it? About her? Regina hesitated. Nobody ever asked about her grandmother. People asked for tasks. For sweeping. For trash bags. But never for pieces of her story. Jackson waited patiently. So Regina sat back down on the bucket, and he lowered himself onto an overturned crate opposite her, Billionaire and Janitor, knees almost touching. She raised me, Regina said softly. My mother was mostly gone. Work, addiction, sometimes both. My grandmother kept us fed. Jackson nodded, listening intently. She cooked with whatever she could afford. Sometimes just onions and water. But she always made it taste like love. Her voice cracked. She used to hum while she stirred the pot. Said food carried memory. Soul. That if you cooked with care, people could taste your truth in it. Jackson whispered. She was right. Regina smiled faintly. She taught me every recipe she knew. I memorized them the way most kids memorize TV shows. Jackson's expression softened, a mix of admiration and sorrow. What happened to her? He asked gently. Regina looked down at her hands. She passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Jackson murmured. Me too, she said. Cooking is the only time I feel close to her. For a moment, the room felt sacred, like grief recognized grief and wrapped its arms around them both. Then Jackson inhaled deeply. There's something I want to tell you too, he said. He leaned back, resting his elbows on his knees. I didn't grow up rich, he began. People assume I was born into all this. He gestured vaguely upward, toward the floors where fortunes were traded casually over coffee. But I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with mold on the ceiling and holes in the wall. My mother worked 3 jobs. Some nights, she didn't sleep. Regina's eyes widened. I used to cook for my little brother and sister, Jackson said with a small smile. Nothing like your food. Mostly ramen, whatever canned stuff we could buy. But I tried. Regina could almost picture him, young, tired, determined, standing on a stool stirring a pot too big for him. When I married Jane, he continued, she told me to never talk about my past. Said it made me look weak. Said investors wanted a man who came from pedigree, not poverty. He rubbed his forehead, ashamed. So I buried it. All of it. Even the parts that made me who I am. Regina's voice was soft but firm. You shouldn't have had to. Jackson looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. Respect. Recognition. A sense of being seen. You're not like her, Regina whispered. He shook his head. No, I'm not. Silence fell, gentle and heavy. Regina's heart beat a little faster. Jackson's did too. Neither said anything more. And they didn't need to. Meanwhile, Jane can feel everything crumbling. While Regina and Jackson sat quietly in a supply closet sharing the parts of themselves money couldn't touch, Jane Mirren stormed through the building like a hurricane on legs. Her heels struck the floor with sharp, spiteful clicks. She couldn't find her husband anywhere. Her texts were ignored. Her calls unanswered. And the looks employees gave her now, cold, judgmental, unafraid, sent rage spiraling through her veins. She rounded a corner and saw 3 interns whispering. They froze when they saw her. Jane's lips curled. What are you staring at? The interns scattered. Jane's blood buzzed with fury. Her palms were slick. Her breathing sharp. She marched toward Jackson's office and stopped dead. She saw something through the open doorway of a supply room down the hall. 2 figures sitting close together. A man in rolled sleeves. A woman in a janitor uniform. Their heads bent in intimate conversation. Her heart clenched. Not in jealousy. In a deeper, darker emotion. Fear. She stepped closer, heels silent for once. She saw Jackson leaning forward, speaking softly. So softly she couldn't hear his words. She saw Regina smiling sadly, nodding. She saw the distance between them. Small. Comfortable. Dangerous. Jane's chest tightened. No, she whispered. No. 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 This wasn't part of her plan. Regina was supposed to be humiliated. Destroyed. Fired. Not sitting with her husband like an equal. Not peeling back the layers Jane could never reach. Not touching parts of him Jane had never awakened. Jane's nails dug into her palms. Her throat tightened. Her vision blurred around the edges. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Losing. She stepped back, stumbling, gripping the wall for support. Her world, her illusion of superiority, was collapsing, and at the center of the wreckage sat Regina King. The world had already heard Regina King's name, but they had not yet heard Jackson Mirren's truth. And that truth was about to crack through the polished glass tower of Mirren Tech like a lightning strike. The public appearance no one expected. When the company's PR team announced that Jackson Mirren would give a live public statement addressing the viral Breakroom incident, the media lost its mind. It took less than an hour for every major network to set up cameras in front of Mirren Tech headquarters. Employees packed the atrium. Influencers streamed in. Protesters lined the street outside with signs. Respect service workers' classism is violence. Pay Regina what you promised. And at the very front of the crowd, quiet, almost hiding, stood Regina King. She wasn't supposed to be there. She told herself she'd only come to clock in for the morning shift. But when she saw the rows of news vans, she drifted toward the noise like a magnet. Her heart hammered when she saw the stage. Jackson Mirren stood behind the podium, adjusting the mic. He looked exhausted, haunted, human. Not the sleek billionaire from the financial magazines. Not Jane's perfectly molded husband. Just a man with shadows under his eyes and a truth living in his throat. The cameras flashed like lightning. Jackson cleared his throat. His voice trembled, and the world fell silent. It's time I tell you who I really am. Jackson's gaze drifted over the crowd, employees, reporters, strangers, and then it stopped. On Regina. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But something soft flickered in his eyes. Then he looked back at the cameras. I know the world is angry, he began. I know you're shocked by what you saw. And I need to tell you. There is a reason my reaction was so intense. The crowd leaned forward. Social media comments flew at lightning speed. Is he about to cry again? What's he hiding? Where's Jane? Jackson took a slow breath. And then, my mother died when I was 11. Regina's breath hitched. The atrium fell still. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with my mother and siblings, Jackson continued softly. We had holes in the walls. Sometimes no heat. Sometimes no electricity. But somehow she always found a way to put food on the table. He swallowed hard. Food wasn't just food for us. It was survival. It was comfort. It was love. His voice broke on the last word. And when I tasted Regina King's oxtail stew, he paused, fighting tears. It tasted exactly like the last meal my mother ever cooked for us. The room erupted in gasps. Regina's hand flew to her mouth. She felt her knees weaken. Jackson steadied himself on the podium. That flavor, that memory, it hit me like a punch to the chest. I've spent years, decades, burying where I came from. Pretending I never lived that life. Pretending I never struggled. His eyes darkened with shame. Because my wife insisted I hide it. A collective what? Rippled through the audience. The truth about Jane. Jackson continued. Jane told me the truth would make me look weak. She said investors wouldn't take me seriously if they knew I grew up poor. That the world needed a clean image, a man of pedigree, not hardship. So I gave in. I buried my past. I buried my mother's memory. I buried myself. A few employees wiped tears. Regina felt her chest tighten painfully. Jackson exhaled shakily. But yesterday, Regina's cooking brought everything back. Every warmth. Every memory. Every part of me I lost along the way. He looked into the cameras with a conviction that sent chills through the room. And I refused to bury it anymore. As Jackson's testimony poured out, the livestream comment feeds exploded. Jane made him hide his identity? Regina is the hero of this story. This poor man. Food is home. I'm crying. This is the realest CEO statement ever. Regina felt a tear slip down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Every word Jackson spoke felt like a thread tugging at her heart, pulling her closer into a story she never imagined being part of. Jane watches from the shadows. Upstairs on the mezzanine balcony, hidden behind a sleek marble column, Jane Mirren watched the scene unfold. Her face was as pale as porcelain. Her hands shook so violently she had to grip the railing. No, he wouldn't, she whispered. But he did. He was telling the whole world the one thing she had spent years forcing him to bury. Her worst fear. Her greatest insecurity. Once, she thought grooming Jackson into the perfect husband would elevate her, make her powerful, untouchable. But now, it made her the villain. Her chest heaved as she watched her husband reclaim a piece of himself she had no control over. And then he said the words that shattered her. Regina's food brought me back my mother. You never have. The auditorium gasped as if struck. Regina clutched her chest. Her breath stalled. Jane's hand flew to her mouth, as if to keep her soul from escaping. Jackson continued, voice trembling. Regina reminded me that my past isn't shameful. It's part of me. Part of who I am. Part of why I work as hard as I do. And I am done pretending it never happened just to maintain an image that was never mine. His eyes drifted again toward Regina, softly, gratefully. And something unspoken passed between them. Not romance. Not longing. Something deeper. Recognition. Respect. Kinship. Regina feels every word. Regina felt like she was witnessing something sacred. Something she wasn't supposed to see, yet was meant to hear. Jackson hadn't said her name like she was just a janitor. He'd said it like she was a lifeline. Like she was the spark that lit a dark place inside him. Regina's mind flashed back to the supply closet, the quiet conversation, the shared pain. This, she realized, wasn't about celebrity or virality. This was about a man reclaiming the parts of himself he had lost. And she had unintentionally been the bridge back to them. Jane stumbled down the mezzanine stairway, nearly tripping over her designer heels. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. Isn't that his wife? She looked sick. She must be mortified. She reached the backstage entrance and shoved through security. Where is he? She demanded. Mrs. Mirren, please. Where is he? They hesitated but parted. Jane rushed behind the curtains just as Jackson stepped off the stage. He looked drained, pale, but lighter somehow. Jane grabbed his arm. Jackson, what did you just do? He didn't look at her. She shook him harder. You humiliated us. You humiliated me. Jackson turned his head slowly, his gaze cold. I told the truth. That wasn't the truth. It was emotional manipulation. That woman has you wrapped around her finger. His jaw clenched. Regina didn't manipulate anyone. And don't call her that woman. Jane's voice rose, shrill, panicked. You think the world will respect you for crying on camera? For talking about poverty? You look pathetic. Jackson finally looked at her. Really looked at her. No, he said quietly. I looked human. Jane stiffened. Her eyes glistened with rage and something deeper, fear. Why are you doing this to me? She whispered. Why are you choosing her over me? Jackson stepped back as if her words were toxic. This isn't about choosing anyone, he said. This is about telling the truth. Something you've never allowed me to do. She reached for him again. Jackson, please. I did it for us. For our image. For our future. He shook his head. No. You did it because your ego is built on control. And I'm done being controlled. Jane felt the floor of her world crack. Don't do this, she whispered. Don't walk away from me. I'm not walking away, he said. I'm standing up. Those words hit her like a gunshot. Jackson stepped past her, exhaustion dragging his shoulders down. Jane didn't follow. She couldn't. She stood frozen backstage, shaking, watching the man she built, polished, molded, sculpted from the outside, finally show the world the man he actually was on the inside. And she realized with bone-deep dread. She never knew that man at all. Regina leaves quietly, but changed. As reporters swarmed Jackson, Regina quietly slipped out through a side door, overwhelmed. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway. Every word Jackson said replayed in her mind. But one line burned brightest. Regina's food brought me back my mother. She didn't know why, but tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Not sadness. Not even joy. Something more powerful. A sense of purpose. She had spent years cleaning floors no one noticed. Invisible. Silent. Replaceable. But her grandmother's recipe, her culture, her memory, her love, had touched the heart of the most unreachable man in the world. And she understood, for the first time. She wasn't invisible anymore. She had never been. Jane Mirren had always believed she was untouchable. Untouchable in wealth. Untouchable in status. Untouchable in the way people feared her, respected her, bowed around her like she was carved from marble and money. But for the first time in her life, she woke up to a world where nobody bowed. The internet certainly didn't. And neither did her husband. It began the morning after Jackson's public confession. Jane stepped out of her car into the executive garage, heels sharp, posture stiff, ready to walk into the building and demand answers. But instead of bowing heads, she found whispers. Whispers that didn't stop when she looked their way. A pair of HR analysts stood near the elevators, phones in hand, frozen in panic when she approached. She could see the video they'd been watching before they scrambled to hide it. A video of her, yelling, pointing, humiliating, and in turn so brutally that even Jane's own stomach twisted. She'd forgotten that moment. The camera hadn't. The elevator doors opened, and inside were three executives who normally jumped to greet her. Today, they averted their eyes, holding stiff smiles that didn't reach their faces. "Morning," Jane said, stepping in. The elevator stayed silent. Cold. Almost hostile. Her pulse quickened. "What's going on?" she demanded. No one answered. But one of them, a woman from finance, flinched as she clutched her phone. Jane didn't need to see the screen. She already knew. More videos. Her videos. Her worst moments, preserved forever. At 9:07 a.m., Jane received an email that nearly made her scream. Subject: Mandatory behavioral review. Mandatory. Mandatory. Jackson had once promised her she would never face such humiliation. He had always shielded her from HR. Always. She burst into his office without knocking. Jackson didn't look surprised. "Why didn't you warn me?" she demanded. He didn't even look up from his laptop. "Because I didn't know you were coming." "That's not what I meant," she snapped. "Why didn't you tell me about the review?" Finally, Jackson looked at her. Not with anger. Not with love. With emptiness. "They didn't ask for my permission, Jane. The board initiated it. They saw everything online." Jane's breath faltered. "But you could have stopped it. You always stop it." Jackson closed his laptop gently and folded his hands. "That's the problem. I always stopped it." She froze. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked past her. "You need to go to your review." He didn't touch her, didn't reassure her, didn't soften. And for Jane, that was worse than yelling. It felt like abandonment. The testimonies began. By noon, HR had a line stretching down the hallway. Employees. Some janitors. Some secretaries. Some executive assistants. 2 managers. A chef from the executive dining floor. When Jane walked past them toward the conference room, the air grew tense. Not one person bowed their head. Not one offered a polite smile. And worst of all, not one person looked afraid of her. She sat stiffly in the center chair while 3 HR directors opened folders filled with documents. "Mrs. Mirren," one said gently, "we need to address multiple formal complaints." Jane scoffed. "Complaints? From who?" The director cleared her throat. "From nearly 24 employees." Jane laughed out loud. 20? That's impossible. People are exaggerating because of that ridiculous viral video. The HR team exchanged glances. The second director slid a tablet across the table. "Mrs. Mirren, these aren't new complaints." Jane blinked. "These date back 8 years." The HR director tapped the screen. A video began to play. Jane screaming at a cafeteria worker for placing her entree on the wrong plate. Jane's face turned cold. That's taken out of context. Another tap. Jane belittling a janitor for mopping near her designer shoes. "Oh, come on, that was a joke." Another tap. Jane cornering a young black intern, demanding she redo an entire presentation because the font looked poor. Jane swallowed hard. Her mouth dried. People take things too personally. Another tap. Another. Another. Until it became undeniable. The monster the internet described was real, and she had been looking at her from mirrors for years. That afternoon, Jane recorded a video on her private social media account. It was supposed to be an apology. It was not. "I refuse to sit back while the world praises a janitor for playing the victim," she sneered into the camera. "This is all a setup. People are obsessed with tearing down successful women. Regina is manipulating everyone." Within minutes, the clip leaked. Comments exploded. Wow, she's unhinged. Not her calling the janitor the victim when she offered the BET. Jane is digging her own grave. She needs help. Within an hour, PR contacted the board. Within 2 hours, the board contacted Jackson. And within 3 hours, Jane was ordered to take down the video and attend a psychological evaluation. She refused. Security disabled her company access anyway. For the first time in her life, Jane felt powerless. And it terrified her. Jackson withdraws his protection. That evening, Jane stormed into their penthouse, expecting Jackson to defend her. He didn't. He sat on the couch, tie loosened, staring out at the city with a haunted expression. Jackson, she hissed, the board is treating me like a criminal. They're treating you like an employee, he said quietly. Jane's chest constricted. But I'm your wife. Yes, Jackson replied, my wife. Not my shield. Not my weapon. Not my public image manager. And not my excuse. Jane took a step back as if slapped. You're choosing her, she accused. I'm choosing the truth, Jackson said simply. Jane's voice cracked. Are you in love with her? Jackson's jaw tensed. No, this isn't romantic. But you're terrified because for the first time, I'm not protecting you from your own actions. Jane felt dizzy. Jackson, I did all this for you. For your image. For us. No, he whispered. You did it because you needed control. The breaking point. The next day, Jane was summoned to a private board meeting. Halfway through, she snapped. Everyone is acting like Regina is some kind of saint, she shouted. She's a janitor who cooks like someone's grandma. The board chair slammed her folder shut. That's enough, Jane. Jane froze. These reviews aren't about Regina, the chair continued. They're about you. About your behavior. About the culture of fear you've created. Jane gripped the table. I'm not a monster, she whispered. But no one looked convinced. Her voice shook harder. I'm not. The chair spoke softly. We're not here to judge your past. We're here to help you take accountability, for your sake and the company's. Something inside Jane's chest cracked open. She felt her breath get shallow. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. And then, she broke. Jane rushed into the restroom, locked herself in a stall, pressed both hands against her chest, and finally, let the tears fall. Not elegant movie tears. Ugly tears. Shattering tears. The kind that come from a place so deep it scares you. For years she had been ice. Untouchable. Perfect. But the ice was melting under the heat of truth she could no longer escape. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. Makeup smeared. Hair disheveled. Eyes swollen. She stared at herself as sobs racked her chest. And then, through gasps and tears, the truth tore its way out. I'm terrified, she whispered. I'm terrified he'll leave me. Her throat ached. I'm terrified I was never enough. Another sob. I've never felt enough. The truth kept spilling, unstoppable. I thought control would make me strong, but now I don't know who I am without it. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, shaking violently. For the first time, Jane wasn't the villain. She was just a broken woman in an expensive suit, drowning in the consequences of her own fear. Later that night, after everyone left the building, Jane wandered into Jackson's empty office. The city lights glittered outside the glass walls. She stood in the silence, hugging her arms around herself. Her voice was barely audible, a whisper meant only for the room, for the darkness, for herself. I don't know who I am without control. And the worst part was, she knew it was the truest thing she had ever said. For the first time in her life, Regina King woke up to a world that wasn't indifferent to her. Her phone buzzed nonstop on her nightstand. New messages, new emails, new opportunities. Her face was everywhere. Not just in the context of scandal anymore. Not just as the janitor who had humbled a billionaire wife, but as someone people admired, celebrated, respected. It was overwhelming. It was surreal. It was terrifying. And it was only the beginning. Regina arrived at Mirren Tech early, hoping the quiet hours before dawn would give her a chance to breathe. The lobby team, who had never once acknowledged her, now stood straighter, offering warm smiles. One even said, "Morning, Miss King." Miss King, not the janitor. She wasn't used to that. Upstairs, she found HR waiting for her at the elevator. "Regina," said Marissa, the HR director. "Could we speak with you?" The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft ding, sealing Regina into a moment that felt unreal. "Don't worry," Marissa added. "It's good news." In the meeting room, Marissa slid a formal letter across the table. "We'd like to formally offer you the role as head of the Employee Wellness Kitchen." Regina blinked. "Wellness what?" "It's a new initiative," Marissa said, smiling. "Started yesterday. The goal is to bring healthier, accessible meals to all employees, not just executives. And you want me to run it?" "No," Marissa replied. "We need you to run it." Regina stared at the letter. It wasn't a symbolic title. It wasn't charity. It was a legitimate leadership role. Salary, 6 figures. Benefits, full. Hours, flexible. "So," Marissa asked gently, "will you accept?" Regina swallowed around the knot in her throat. I don't know if I'm qualified." "Regina," Marissa said, "for years the employees upstairs ate food that never nourished them. You changed that in one afternoon. You gave this place heart." Regina's lips parted. No one had ever put words like that in her direction. She nodded slowly. "I accept." Marissa beamed. By lunchtime, news of her promotion had leaked. By evening, the world knew. By nightfall, her inbox broke. She received 5 sponsorship offers from cooking brands, 2 scholarship packages from culinary institutes, a proposal for a cookbook deal titled Regina's Table, invitations to appear on Good Morning America, The Today Show, and multiple podcasts, a message from Oprah's team asking for her availability. Regina stared at her screen, breathless. "What is even happening?" she whispered. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was from the prestigious American Culinary Institute. "Full scholarship. For years. All expenses covered. We want you." She sat down before she collapsed. In 48 hours, she had gone from scrubbing trash bins to having a future that people dreamed about. She didn't know how to feel, trying to stay grounded. That night, Regina took the bus, not a private car, not an Uber, to the cemetery on the east side of the city. Her grandmother's grave was tucked beneath an old oak tree, a place that smelled like rain and memory. Regina knelt, brushing leaves off the headstone. "Grandma," she whispered, "people want to pay me just to talk about your cooking." Her voice trembled. "I don't understand any of this. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if this is me." A breeze rustled the tree branches overhead. She closed her eyes, imagining her grandmother's voice. "Baby, the world will always try to make you forget where you came from. Your job is to remember." Regina set down a small Tupperware container of oxtail stew, her grandmother's recipe, as an offering. "I miss you," she said softly. "I hope I'm doing this right." She touched the gravestone once more before standing. She didn't feel ready, but she felt guided. The next morning, Jackson sent a message requesting a private meeting. Regina felt her stomach clench, not from fear, but from the weight of what their earlier conversations had meant. He wasn't like Jane. He wasn't cruel. He was broken in a different way, cracked along lines he had never spoken aloud until her food opened them. When Regina stepped into his office, Jackson was standing at the windows, back turned, looking out at the city like he was carrying it on his shoulders. When he turned to face her, his expression softened. "Regina," he said, "thank you for coming." "I didn't have much of a choice," she joked quietly. He chuckled. "Fair enough." He gestured to a set of documents on his desk. "I'm starting the Mirren Foundation for Culinary Equity. I want you to be part of it." Regina blinked. "You want me?" "Why?" "Because you understand food in a way that's real," he said. "Not in a Michelin star way. Not in a showy way. In a human way. You understand what food means to people, how it shapes memory, healing, identity." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You understand what my mother understood." Regina's breath hitched. "That's why I need you," Jackson continued. "Not for your skill. For your heart." The room felt too small suddenly. "Jackson," Regina said quietly, "I'm just a janitor who got lucky." Jackson stepped closer. "You're not just anything." And this wasn't luck. This was truth meeting the right moment. Regina's eyes dropped to the documents. "This is a lot," she whispered. "I know," Jackson said gently. "Take your time." But she could feel Jane's anger bubbling somewhere in the building. She could feel the pressure from the world, the internet, the offers. She could feel herself stretched between who she used to be and who everyone suddenly wanted her to be. "Let me think about it," she said finally. Jackson nodded, a kindness in his eyes she wasn't prepared for. Of course. By the end of the week, the attention had turned blinding. Employees who once ignored her now looked at Regina like she was a celebrity. People asked for photos. Interns brought her gifts. Executives tried to shake her hand. Some of the janitorial staff cried when she passed. "You make us proud," one whispered. "You make us seen." Regina nearly cried herself. But with attention came pressure. Bloggers debated her brand. Interviewers made assumptions about her message. People online argued about her background as if she wasn't a person but a symbol. Headlines read, "The janitor who shook a billion-dollar empire." "The woman who made a CEO cry." "The oxtail recipe that broke the internet." Regina felt dizzy. Jane, meanwhile, watched the world praise Regina while her own reputation collapsed. The tension in the building grew sharp enough to cut paper. One night, Regina locked herself in the wellness kitchen long after everyone left. She stood at the large stainless steel counter, chopping onions with careful, measured movements. Her hands knew what to do. Her heart did not. "Am I changing?" she whispered to the empty kitchen. "Or am I being changed?" She could hear her grandmother again. "Your roots feed you. Not fame. Not money." Regina inhaled deeply. Okay. She would stay grounded. She would stay her. But she didn't know how. The next day, Regina decided to walk the floors. Not as a janitor, but as the new head of the wellness kitchen. Employees greeted her with warmth. Some even hugged her. Regina inspected ingredient orders, met with nutritionists, interviewed kitchen staff, and redesigned meal plans so every employee, regardless of position, had access to fresh, healthy, comforting food. Word spread quickly. Regina is running the kitchen like a community center. She listens to everyone. She cares. Executives noticed. Employees adored her. Even HR commented, "She's the most effective leader we've seen in years." Regina didn't feel like a leader, but she was becoming one. One afternoon, Regina stepped into the cafeteria to check on a new recipe the kitchen was testing. When she walked in, the entire room erupted into applause. Hundreds of employees stood, cheered, saluted her with their forks. Some cried, some clapped, some mouthed thank you. Regina froze, overwhelmed. She didn't ask for this. She didn't seek it. Yet she had become something rare, a symbol of dignity, a reminder that kindness mattered. That work, no matter how humble, had worth. That leadership didn't require a corner office or a billionaire name. It required heart, and she had always had that. That evening, she sat alone on a bench outside the building. The city glowed around her. Her phone buzzed with an email from Oprah's team. She let it buzz. She closed her eyes, grounding herself in the warm night air. And for the first time since this story began, she whispered, "I think I'm ready. Ready for success. Ready for leadership. Ready for the world. Ready to honor her grandmother's legacy. Not by becoming someone new, but by finally stepping fully into who she had always been." Employees passing by paused, watching her with admiration. Their symbol, their voice, their courage. Regina stood, feeling steady, transforming, elevating, rising. She whispered into the night, "Let's see where this goes." The announcement came on a Monday morning. Every inbox pinged. Every monitor flashed a company-wide alert. Every employee, from executives in glass offices to janitors scrubbing stairwells, received the same message. Mandatory town hall, 5,000 employees, attend in person or via stream. Special speaker, Regina King. Regina stared at the email in disbelief. Her? Speaking in front of 5,000 people? She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had given interviews. She had directed a kitchen. She had even met with scholarship committees and foundation teams. But this was different. This was stepping onto a world stage inside the building that had once ignored her. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. Your presence is required. Your insight is invaluable. Your story is reshaping corporate culture. She closed her laptop before she could hyperventilate. The arena. Miranteca's main atrium had been transformed into something that looked like a political rally crossed with a global summit. A towering stage, framed by LED screens. Rows and rows of seats stretching further than Regina's eyes could follow. Cameras lining the aisles. Boom mics dangling overhead. Press badges flashing. Executives sitting ramrod straight in the front rows. 5,000 employees filled the space. 10,000 more watched online. Regina stood behind the stage curtain, her heart pounding so hard she thought people might hear it. "Are you ready?" a stage manager whispered. "No," Regina whispered back. He smiled sympathetically. "You'll be brilliant." But Regina didn't feel brilliant. She felt like a little girl standing in her grandmother's kitchen again, holding a wooden spoon that was far too big for her hands. A voice appeared behind her. "Regina." She turned. Jackson stood there, suit perfectly pressed, eyes tired but warm. "You're going to change something today," he said. Regina shook her head. "I'm just a woman who cooks stew." Jackson smiled gently. "No, you're a woman who reminded an entire company what it means to be human." Her breath caught. Before she could respond, the stage manager leaned in. "Miss King, it's time." The entire atrium buzzed with expectation. Phones lifted. Whispers surged like ocean waves. "Is that her? She's really speaking?" She changed everything. She made the CEO cry. God, I'm going to cry already. When Regina stepped onto the stage, a roar erupted. Not applause, not cheers. A collective inhale, as if everyone knew they were witnessing something historic. She approached the microphone, hands shaking, voice caught somewhere between fear and resolve. But then she saw them. The janitors standing together in the far left row. The cafeteria workers. The security guards. The night shift crew wearing their badges with pride. They smiled at her. And she steadied. She wasn't here for executives. She wasn't here for headlines. She was here for them. Regina took a breath. "Hi," she began softly, voice trembling but warm. "I'm Regina King. If you don't know me, well, that's sort of the point." A few people chuckled. Regina continued. "I've walked these halls for years. Cleaned your floors. Emptied your trash. Wiped your tables after lunches I couldn't afford. Most days, people didn't look at me. They saw the uniform, but not the person in it." The room fell silent. "But something happened recently that made the whole world look at me, and at this company. And I want to tell you what it taught me." Her voice grew stronger. "My grandmother used to say, dignity isn't something people give you. It's something you carry. But sometimes, the world tries to take that from you. Sometimes it steps on you because your job doesn't come with a corner office or a six-figure salary." Some employees wiped their eyes. Regina continued. "Service workers, janitors, cooks, receptionists are the backbone of every building, of every dream, of every success story. Without us, nothing works, nothing runs, nothing thrives. And yet, we are the people the world looks through." The executives shifted uncomfortably. Until now, a whisper rippled through the crowd. "When I was told to cook for a billionaire's husband in front of a crowd," Regina said, "I felt humiliated. I felt small. But my grandmother's voice came back to me. She used to say, whatever you touch, baby, bless it. Bless the food. Bless the room. Bless your own hands." Her voice cracked. So I cooked with the same love she taught me. Quiet tears fell across the audience. And when Mr. Miran tasted my food, something broke open. In him. In this building. In all of us. Jackson lowered his head, emotional. "Not because I'm special," Regina said, "but because love is special. Because compassion is special. Because seeing each other, really seeing each other, is special." She placed both hands on the podium, steady now. "So here's what I want to say today. To all the service workers who feel invisible, you matter. Your work matters. Your hands matter. And you deserve respect, not because of what you do, but because of who you are." The crowd broke. People cried openly. Employees clapped their hands over their mouths. Executives blinked back tears they tried to hide. Regina swallowed hard. "And to this company," she said, turning her gaze to the leadership section, "please remember this. A healthy workplace doesn't start at the top floor. It starts with how you treat the people who clean it. Thunderous applause exploded through the atrium. Regina stepped back, breath trembling, heart pounding. Then, she whispered the words that sealed her legacy. Human dignity isn't optional. It's the foundation. For the first time in Mirantech's history, the entire company, executives, managers, interns, janitors, rose to their feet. Some clapped, some sobbed, some stood in reverent silence. Regina didn't know where to look, overwhelmed by love she had never received before. Jackson walked onto the stage. He didn't try to steal the spotlight. He didn't raise his hands for attention. He simply stood next to her. Microphone in hand, he said, "Regina King reminded us what leadership looks like. And today, on behalf of the board and this entire company, I want to thank her." A fresh wave of applause shook the atrium. She reminded me, personally, of something I had forgotten. That success isn't built on perfection. It's built on humility, compassion, and community. And Mirantech lost sight of that. He turned to Regina, and she brought it back. Regina's eyes filled with tears. The chairman of the board stepped forward next. His tone was measured, sincere, and heavy with accountability. After careful review, he announced, Mirantech will be implementing immediate reforms. Screens behind him lit up with bullet points. Unbiased promotion reviews for all departments, pay equity audits, mandatory diversity and inclusion training, mental health resources for all employees, a complete restructuring of service staff treatment, and pathways for advancement. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some employees cried from relief. Some hugged each other. It was the first real sign of systemic change. And finally, the chairman said, "We want to acknowledge that many employees were mistreated in the past, particularly by individuals in positions of power." Everyone knew who he meant. The camera feed shifted slightly to the back of the atrium. Jane stood alone, half-hidden, as if the shadows themselves were the only place she felt worthy of. Her makeup was minimal, her posture hunched, her eyes red-rimmed. She didn't look like the icy socialite who once slapped a check on a breakroom table like a weapon. She looked like a woman cracked wide open. When Regina's name was spoken, Jane's lip trembled. When applause thundered through the building, Jane wiped her eyes. When Jackson thanked Regina on stage, Jane's shoulders collapsed inward, as if the air had been punched out of her. She was humbled. She was hurting. And for once, she didn't try to hide it. Within minutes, clips of Regina's speech were online. Hashtag dignity starts here. Hashtag Regina speaks. Hashtag respect the workers. Millions of views in an hour. Tears. Praise. Messages of solidarity from labor unions, activists, celebrities, and everyday people who felt invisible in their own workplaces. Food bloggers recreated her grandmother's recipes on live streams. News anchors quoted her lines about dignity. A senator retweeted the speech with the caption, "Every corporation in America should listen to Regina King." And through it all, Regina stood off stage, behind a curtain, hands pressed to her face as she cried quietly. Not because she wanted attention, not because the world applauded her, but because, for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Really, truly seen. She had spoken for the people who felt invisible, and now none of them were invisible anymore. Regina inhaled deeply. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how much more change was coming. But she knew this. She had changed something powerful, something permanent, something bigger than herself. The morning after the town hall felt different. Not quieter, not busier, just lighter, as if the building itself was exhaling for the first time in years. Mirantech's employees didn't walk, they floated. People greeted janitors by name. Executives held doors open. Managers scheduled check-ins with teams they had ignored for ages. Regina arrived through the back entrance, still not used to the way people now pointed, whispered, or smiled at her with something close to reverence. She wasn't famous. She reminded herself that every day, she was simply seen, and that was enough. Jackson invited her to the 52nd floor a week later, the first time Regina had ever been willingly called into the executive suite. The doors opened to a large lounge, blinding windows, marble floors, and a long table scattered with folders, legal documents, and stacks of proposals. Jackson stood near the window, tie loosened, coat off, looking both powerful and undeniably human. "You ready?" he asked. "I don't think I'll ever be ready for this much carpet," Regina whispered. He laughed, and the sound eased the tension in her shoulders. He motioned for her to take a seat across from him. At the center of the table sat a pristine white folder embossed with gold lettering. The Mirren Foundation for Culinary Equity, founding advisor, Regina King. Regina blinked hard. You really meant it." "Of course I meant it," Jackson said. "You deserve to shape something that lasts." He walked around the table and sat beside her, not across, not above. Beside. "The vision is simple," he explained. "We fund emerging cooks from low-income communities. We provide grants, scholarships, training kitchens, mentorship programs. We partner with schools and community centers. You'll help us decide where the money goes, who needs it most, and how to keep it authentic." Regina stared down at her name. Not as a janitor. Not as a background worker. Not as the woman who cooked oxtail stew in a breakroom microwave. As a leader. "How much control would I have?" she asked quietly. "Full advisory authority," Jackson said. "You'll guide the heart. I'll handle the business." Her breath caught. "And the funding?" He smiled, soft, humble. "Enough to feed the world for a long, long time." Regina felt tears forming. Not because she needed money. Not because she wanted glory. But because someone finally understood the power of where she came from. "Jackson," she whispered, "this means everything." He shook his head. "You mean everything to this mission." While the foundation blossomed, Jane Mirren disappeared. Not literally, but publicly. Her social media accounts went dark. Her charity appearances stopped. Her spa appointments were canceled. Her assistants told the board she was on personal leave. Really, she was doing something that terrified her more than headlines ever could. She was dealing with herself. Therapy, behavioral evaluations, accountability training, daily journaling sessions ordered by her psychologist. She resisted at first, argued, cried, shut down, but slowly, painfully, she began peeling back the layers. For the first time in her life, she confronted the emptiness she'd been covering with diamonds and dominance. Her therapist encouraged her to apologize privately to the people she had hurt most. Regina was first on that list. It happened 2 weeks after the town hall. Regina had just finished a meeting with the foundation's early planning committee when Jackson approached her with an unreadable expression. "Regina, Jane wants to see you." Regina's stomach tightened. "Here," she whispered. "In a private conference room," Jackson said. She asked for no cameras, no assistants, no board members. Regina hesitated. She could refuse. She had every right to refuse. But something inside her, shaped by her grandmother's love, her mother's grit, and her own hard-won dignity, told her that healing meant facing things, not running from them. "Okay," she said quietly. Jackson's eyes softened. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He escorted her to a small glass room on the 40th floor and opened the door for her. Jane sat alone at the table. No makeup, no jewelry, a simple sweater and jeans, clothes Regina had never imagined on the woman who once weaponized couture. Jane stood when Regina entered. Her hands trembled. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice had none of its usual sharpness. Regina sat across the table, hands folded, steady but cautious. Jane exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to start this." "You can start by being honest," Regina said gently. Jane lifted her eyes that looked raw, swollen, stripped of power. "Okay," she whispered. "Honest." She swallowed hard. "You didn't just cook for my husband that day," Jane said. "You exposed every ugly part of me I've been terrified to face." The words cracked in her throat. "I have spent my entire life trying to look perfect," she continued. "Trying to sound perfect. Trying to be the perfect wife to a man the world worships. And every time I felt not enough, which was almost always, I hurt people smaller than me." She shook her head, tears forming. "I thought controlling others made me powerful, but it just made me cruel." Regina stayed silent. Jane wiped her face with her sleeve, breath shaking. "I'm sorry, Regina," she whispered. "I am so sorry. For humiliating you. For dismissing you. For seeing you as less." Regina inhaled slowly. It hurt to hear, but it also healed. She leaned forward. I forgive you, Regina said softly, voice unwavering. But forgiving isn't the same as forgetting. And it isn't the same as trusting. Jane nodded slowly, almost gratefully. I understand. I wish you well, Regina continued. And I hope you continue doing the work. But I need boundaries. Jane gave a small, broken smile. You deserve them. For the first time since the scandal began, Jane looked peaceful, as if she had been carrying something heavy her whole life, and had finally set it down. Thank you, she whispered, for being kinder to me than I ever was to you. Regina stood. Jane did not reach for her, did not ask for more, did not try to cling. She simply bowed her head, a gesture of respect Regina never expected from her. And Regina walked out with her dignity intact. Spring arrived earlier than usual that year, warm sunlight pouring through community center windows across the city. In one of those centers, a bright building painted with murals and handprints, volunteers rolled in carts of food, portable burners, cutting boards, and crates of ingredients donated by the Mirren Foundation. The banner above the room read, "The King Community Kitchen, you can rise from anywhere." Regina stood at the front of the room, wearing a soft blue apron embroidered with the foundation's logo. 10 children, ranging from age 7 to 16, sat on stools around stainless steel counters, chatting nervously. Some had parents in prison. Some lived in food deserts. Some had never held a knife properly, never cooked a meal from scratch, never believed they could learn something so skillful. Regina clapped her hands. All right, everyone. Who's ready to make something special today? Hands shot up. Laughter filled the room. And Regina felt something deep inside her, something warm, something ancient, start to bloom. These children looked at her the way she once looked at her grandmother. With trust, with hope, with the belief that food could be love. Halfway through the lesson, Jackson arrived quietly. No cameras, no security entourage. Just him, holding a box of donated aprons. He stayed near the wall, not wanting to overshadow or intrude. Regina nodded at him in thanks, but continued teaching, keeping the moment focused on the kids. Jackson smiled softly, the smile of a man who finally understood boundaries, respect, and equality. He wasn't here as a CEO, or a billionaire, or a man rescued by a miracle of cooking. He was here as support, and he stayed in the background the entire time. He watched Regina reclaim something that had once been taken from her. Her voice, her purpose, her joy. As the class wound down, Regina pulled out a large pot, old, worn, and seasoned by generations. This, she said, placing the pot in the center of the room, belonged to my grandmother. The children leaned in. Today, we're making the recipe that changed my life, she continued. Oxtail stew. Gasps and excited murmurs filled the room. It smells so good already. Can we help chop stuff? My grandma used to make stew too. As they cooked, the room filled with rich aromas, scallions, peppers, slow-simmering broth, herbs that Regina crushed gently between her fingers just like her grandmother taught her. She guided small hands, corrected knife grips, encouraged shy children, laughed when a boy nearly dropped an onion out of pure enthusiasm. And when the stew was done, the children gathered around with bowls in their hands. Regina tasted the first spoonful, warm, soulful, familiar. Then she looked at the group. You know, she said softly, my grandmother used to tell me something. She said, baby, when you feed people, you're telling them they matter. The children grew quiet. You matter, Regina whispered. All of you. Jackson wiped a tear discreetly. When the children left, full, warm, and smiling, Regina stood alone in the center for a moment. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the pot, the cutting boards, the aprons scattered across countertops. She lifted a wooden spoon, the same type her grandmother used, and felt something unmistakable. She had become the woman she once needed. A guide, a nurturer, a protector of dignity. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of the kitchen, a scent of healing, of possibility, of legacy. Because in the end, Regina King discovered a truth more powerful than wealth, fame, or viral headlines. Dignity, once claimed, can transform more than a life. it can transform the world.